See, I'm going to tell you the story of David and Goliath. See, David and Goliath is a biblical story, and the concept is simple. See, David, who would eventually become the king of Israel, was just a sheep herder, a young sheep herder. And at the time, Israel and the Philistines were at war. So they had this gigantic man, around 6'10", 360 pounds of pure muscle. See, they called him Goliath, and Goliath was an absolute monster. Now, the Philistines were all surrounding Israel, and they were ready to attack and destroy the city. And quite frankly, Israel was a little bit scared. See, at the time, the king of Israel, King Saul, he noticed this and realized that he had to act, but he didn't know what to do because he didn't know if he could beat the Philistines at this time. So Goliath made a very clear declaration. What he said was, "Send your greatest warrior out here, and I will crush him. And then if I win, I will be able to take everything that you have." The Philistines would then, in fact, overcome Israel and take over. So at the time, King Saul and all of his men sat down to figure out, well, what do we do? Now, David, this young sheep herder, overheard the situation and was looking over the hill and seeing this man Goliath and seeing the Philistines out there, and had to make a tough decision. He knew that he had to stand up for what is right. God spoke to him and told him to go talk to King Saul and to essentially be the individual that would fight for Israel. So he walks into the king's chambers, where he was pretty welcomed at because he used to play instruments for the king at the time. And he says to the king, he says, "Send me. I will fight for us. I will be the one who fights for us and protects Israel." All the king's men were laughing. And Saul, who actually had a lot of love for David at the time, looked at the boy and said, "No, there's no way that you're going to be able to beat him." See, David was a small guy. He wasn't very strong. He wasn't very tall. He didn't really have that warrior demeanor. He was just a sheep herder. But see, David, he took that personally, explained to King Saul and said, "Look, often when the lions and the other beasts come from the woods and they try to take my sheep, I always go after my sheep and I always kill those animals. I have killed lions, and I will do the same with this man, Goliath. I will kill him the same way I have killed these lions." So King Saul looks at David and says, "Very well, go." They try to dress him up in some armor, but he's a small guy. He can't really move, doesn't really fit him. So he takes off the armor and he just takes the things that he normally has with him when he's herding his sheep: his staff, his slingshot, and just his normal everyday clothes. So he goes out to fight Goliath, this 6'9", 350-pound monster, and they stand about 50 yards from each other. At this point, Goliath, he screams to the top of his lungs, and he lets everyone know that he's going to crush this young boy. Israel at this time is looking at their savior and saying, "There's no way we're going to win." In a whisper, just enough so that way David could hear him, Goliath says, "I'm going to crush your head." And just like that, he starts sprinting toward David. At a max sprint, David recognized he only had one shot at this. So, what does he do? As Goliath is running maximum speed, crossing this 50-yard gap, David takes his slingshot, the same slingshot he would use to hit those lions and those beasts, and he swings it, and he swings it, and he swings it, and he releases this slingshot with perfect precision and hits Goliath directly on his head just as he's approaching, knocking him out cold. Takes his sword, cuts off his head, and just like that, David defeated Goliath. See, a lot of the fairy tale stories will have you believe that Goliath was some 9-foot tall giant and David was a midget. But in reality, these were just two men. Never, ever think that just because you're small, a little bit weaker, a little bit unassuming, that you don't have the power or the strength to overcome even the greatest obstacles. Because you do.